This is an introduction to Assignment 2. So in Assignment 2, we're going to build some classes. Assignment 2 is made up of 3 exercises. Exercise 2.1 is to create a class to represent the purchase price of a can of soda. One thing I'd like you to keep in mind as you do these exercises is that the exercises themselves were picked based on the things that we discussed during the lessons. So this may or may not be a class or an exercise or an activity that we do if we had all the resources of C# at our disposal. But as I created these exercises, I'm limiting them to just the stuff that I talked about in the lessons. So don't be too concerned about whether or not a particular exercise is something you would necessarily do if you were building a production system. Part of what the exercises are designed to do, in fact, is to improve the design of the code as we move forward and have access to additional resources. So this particular exercise, as many of them do, will build on the application we started with earlier. And so you'll add to that project for this exercise. And in this particular one, I've given you a sketch or a skeleton or a sort of interface to the class in question. So the class itself is called purchase price. And we have a constructor that takes no parameters, and that will set our purchase price to 0. We have another constructor that takes the initial price so that the user of the code can actually specify what they want the purchase price value to be. And when I say user, by the way, what I mean is the code that makes use of purchase price. So the code where purchase price exists, and then we create an object of that class. In our case, the user is going to be the main method. And lastly, a property that gets and sets the value of the purchase price. Okay, notice that this is a property. We know it's a property because the comment there says it's a property. And it doesn't end with a semicolon, so it's not a field. We don't want to make public fields. It's a property, and so you need to add property code. It will be relatively simple, and in fact, all I'm really asking for is what I call a transparent property. But if you'd like to add some additional code that protects the value of the purchase price, that's perfectly reasonable. All right, once you've built that purchase price, you want to go back and use that in your vending machine. In this case, that just means going back to main and instantiating the class. And that will also affect the code that you write to display the purchase price to the human user. The human user may not see any difference. In other words, the input and output statements may look exactly the same on the console window, but the underlying code has changed. Exercise 2.2 is to create a class to represent the cans inside of the vending machine. So we're going to add a can rack, and a can rack is composed of 3 can bins, and 1 can bin holds a particular flavor, so that means there's going to be 3 flavors. And each bin can hold a maximum of 3 cans. So in other words, our vending machine could hold a maximum of 9 cans of 3 different flavors. Now for this exercise, I'm going to ask you to write some system diagnostics debug write line methods. In other words, use those in your class as a simple beginning to instrumentation. So the way a system diagnostics debug write line works is, well, the using directive is system diagnostics, and then the class name is debug, and the method name is writeLine, and you can write information out to the debug window. So here we see the skeleton of CanRack. In other words, all the public parts, but none of their implementations. We have a constructor that takes no parameters. We have add a canna that takes a string of a particular flavor. You'll notice that the flavors are regular, orange, and lemon. We have a remove that removes from that can rack. We have a method that fills the can rack, and a method that empties the can rack of an individual flavor. And optionally, we have an isFull and an isEmpty method to tell you whether or not a particular bin is either full or empty, respectively. So once you have the code for that class written, integrate it back into your vending machine, which is to say your main method. Now for right now, I'm not asking you to allow the human user to be actually able to pick a flavor to eject. You can add that code if you want. We will be adding it later in other assignments. And you should be able to look at the output window to see the flow of control as code is executed inside of the CanRack object. This will be the only class that I'm asking you to write any instrumentation for, but you're welcome to add any additional instrumentation as you do the other classes in the assignments. Now, optionally, if you did write is full and is empty, then you might want to juice up main a little bit by making sure that you don't add a can when it's not inappropriate, in other words, when the bin is full, and you don't remove a can when it's inappropriate, in other words, when the bin is empty. And that's assignment 2.